Next up in the phase, moving on to chapter 12. And this is the last chapter we're going to do a deep dive into, even though you can tell it's not quite the end of the book, but we'll probably just skip over all the other chapters. I mean, you got chapter 13, which is about putting a face to the various people's names that he mentions throughout the book. So it has like their picture or short little bio. You have chapter 14, which is titled The Final Test, where like at the end of each of the chapters, he has a little like test or quiz questions. So all of those are compiled into chapter 14. So like if you pick this book up for yourself, this probably would be a very good chapter for you to go to, just to see how much of the information you actually retained and can remember. Then they got chapter 15, which is titled The Highest Level of Practice. And there's nothing really new covered in here. It's kind of just like a recap or summary of the rest of the book, with the main difference being like what you would have to do to be considered a high-level practitioner. And I'll give you a quick example. So it says here, to be a high-level practitioner, indirect techniques should be working for you no less than 90% of the time. So it's basically just stuff like that. And then you have chapter 16, which is the true end of the book. But this chapter is really just about people's personal phase experiences. So it's kind of like a dream journal entries. So we'll skip that. Anyway, back to chapter 12. So chapter 12 is kind of like a summary chapter as well. It's titled A Collection of Techniques. So here he has all his various techniques all compiled together into one chapter. However, there's a lot of additional techniques that, that at least I don't remember covering, and I'm not about to go back and listen to all my old videos and see which techniques I put in there and which ones I did not. However, just looking at some of these names, like I'm positive we didn't cover all of these. So what I did for that is I just went through, highlighted the ones that I don't recall covering. And then in the final video, in the next video, I'll go ahead and we'll go read through those. Maybe the second to last video, because then after that, I'll follow it up with my final thoughts. And then after we finish up the book too, what I plan on doing at least is I'm going to go to, so like Michael Raduga, he has a lot of like online videos and stuff like that. So I want to check out some of his work on there and then, do another few videos probably based off of those. But anyway, on to chapter 12. So he writes, it's important to remember that direct techniques performed without prior sleep have 1/10 the success rate of indirect techniques performed upon awakening. So if you remember, direct techniques are essentially like what us lucid dreamers would call wilds, or wake-initiated or wake-induced lucid dreams without any prior sleep. That's when you try to have a lucid dream or this phase experience when, when you're first going to sleep at night. And then indirect techniques are essentially wake back to bed stuff. So continuing on, several technique-based tricks can be used to substantially improve the odds of success of practically all of the techniques listed below, which we'll be covering in the next video. First, you should try to not simply perform the techniques for the sake of appearances, but rather give them your all, trying to become one with them and put all of your sensations into them. Next, you can move your gaze up slightly as naturally as possible while keeping your eyes shut, of course. Third, begin to use techniques by first imagining yourself doing a 180-degree turn along your head to toe axis. Fourth, while you're performing your techniques, always try to recall sensations of how they had already worked in the past or of past phase occurrences. Fifth, you should always have a clear motivation for entering the phase. That motivation may perhaps arise from the most interesting plan of action you can think of. So, before going to sleep, you should always have a plan in your head of, what you want to do once you get lucid within your dream or within this whole phase experience. For all of the techniques in which some actions need to be imagined, you should approach them as if the imagined sensations were indeed real. Also keep in mind that the techniques can be made many times more effective by practicing them outside of attempts to enter the phase. So basically when you're totally wide awake, lie in bed, practice running through your chosen cycle of techniques to go through. Make sure you really have them down good. That can help a lot. And then the last thing we'll cover here, the techniques described below, so I guess in the next video, are but a drop in the ocean of their myriad possible variations. It suffices to say that practically every phaser will come up with some technique elements independently and be successful at using them. And I think that whole thing right there is getting at why there's so many techniques in here that I don't ever recall covering before. But then again, too, there really are just kind of slight variations to stuff I probably did cover, but a slight variation, give it its own fancy name, and, it's a different technique, just like that. But anyway, With that said, that wraps it up. And until the next video, keep your face practice legit.